Hello, everyone. I have an exciting episode to share with you today. I gave a speech at Austin College, which is my alma mater, to the Catholic Student Association. The following audio will be that speech. I discuss suffering by looking at the Way of the Cross, a popular devotion, especially during the Lenten season. But I take a different approach. I look at how we can imitate Christ when we carry our own cross, and I do so by applying a psychological lens. As many of y'all know, I'm in a clinical mental health counseling program, which has informed my insights here. However, I'm not speaking in a professional capacity as I'm still a student, but rather from my own personal experiences. Hopefully, you find this helpful. This is the Words with Ward show. I'm your host, Tyler Ward. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I was going to leave this out, but I'm sure we always have those friends that we invite 15 minutes earlier because they're going to be late. And I'm kind of the same way, but I speak a little bit too long. So when Pedro told me to keep it at 20 minutes, I'm hoping he actually meant like 30. But I'll try to keep it in check a little bit. Pedro gave me an introduction, but for a few of y'all that maybe have lost a little bit contact with me and don't know what I'm up to, and then for some of the new faces, I think that an introduction will give a little bit of insight of what I'll be talking about today. So like Pedro said, my name is Tyler Ward. I graduated from Austin College in 2025 with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and a minor in Biology. I also played baseball and played with a few of y'all in the room, so that was exciting. And I also hung up the cleats a year early, so I can relate to y'all both as an athlete and a traditional student. I was also, like many of y'all, part of the Catholic Student Association, and during my tenure, I served as board theologian and social media manager. So those are kind of like the three things that make up who I am. It's faith, fitness, and psychology. And I kind of cathartically get those three things in my life still today, but through different means. For fitness, I've recently taken on endurance running. I've completed 2 marathons, and this year I'll be completing my first 50-mile ultra, and we'll also be doing a Chicago marathon. As my student endeavors, I'm a first-year grad student in a clinical mental health counseling program, which will put me on track for licensure as a therapist. That will be informing a lot of my discussion today, but I will have to include a disclaimer. I'm not speaking professionally, but rather as a private person who's a student, and I have no authority to give therapy advice. So this is personal. And then lastly is my faith. There's a psychology principle called the ecological systems theory. And what it states is that individuals exist in an ecosystem and not simply as in a bubble as a unit. And I like to describe my faith in a similar way. So at the center of that circle is myself. And before I give any type of talk or spiritual direction, I like to first say that I'm a poor, wretched sinner just like everybody else here. And the reason I say that is because I'm not speaking from the heights of the faith, but rather from being in a fallen state before. Outside in the next ring are my nieces, of whom I'm the godfather of. And to the present, they've likely done more for me than I have for them, because oftentimes when tempted into sin, I refuse from doing so because I don't want to leave the kids astray. In the outermost bubble of that, as many of y'all may know from the messages I've sent in the CSA group chat, is that I host a podcast called Words with Ward. And that's another reason I am speaking with y'all today. Throughout all these endeavors and throughout my entire life, I've dealt with an immense amount of struggles and suffering. Today we'll be doing a Bible study, or what y'all call an encounter. And at the end of the encounter, y'all do something called the case study, where y'all each bring forth a problem, a trial, a tribulation that's either your own or something that is going on with a friend or family member in your life. These always stuck out to me because I realized something. Suffering was not just something unique to me, but it was unique to the human experience. Initially, I was going to speak to y'all about the importance of suffering, but I think we all know that we find meaning in suffering. Instead, what I'm going to speak on is how to suffer, how to carry your cross. In my last year here, we were fortunate enough to eventually erect a devotion in a Presbyterian chapel that is very common to the Catholic faith, and that is the Way of the Cross. or the passion narrative of Christ. That will be specifically what I'll be referencing today during my speech, but I'm going to take a slight twist on it. Although the passion narrative should mainly be focused on Christ's suffering, because that's the one that granted us our salvation, we too are called to carry our cross. And if we're going to do it, why not imitate Christ in our own trials and tribulations? Lastly, I'll be applying a psychological lens to doing so. So in the first station, Jesus is condemned to death. Now, I think most people gloss over this part of the condemnation or the passion narrative because it's just something that had to be done in order for him to eventually be crucified. But yet it's important enough to be read in our Nicene Creed. We state he suffered under Pontius Pilate. This has historical context, but what it also provides is a deep theological tie to Pilate's actions and our own. The first to recognize Jesus' divinities were often the demons that he was casting out. This is because of their supreme theological knowledge. In C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, the senior demon Screwtape never denies the power of Christianity, never denies the divinity of Christ. The demons know this. Pontius Pilate, too, recognized Jesus' innocence, for he's innocence himself. Yet, ironically, he mockingly instructs the Roman soldiers to erect a sign on the crucifix, often which read, "The crime of those that were crucified." And he did so in 3 languages. He wrote, "Jesus, King of the Jews." Ironically, he became one of the first great evangelizers. He also fell victim to something called social influence in psychology because the crowd yelled, "Crucify him!" 3 times. Oftentimes in the Passion narrative, we're instructed to read this during Mass. Too often, our ease in betraying Jesus produces a whisper that echoes those very words to crucify him. Our swift, sinful behavior mimics that of a whip, which brutally assailed the spotless victim into a bloody mass. And our closed-fisted greed grasps not possessions, but a hammer that nails his flesh to the cross. Nietzsche's famous quote, "God is dead," further reads, "and we killed him." Though sinful and nihilistic, it's true when spoken as a whimper and not as a war cry. Do we not crucify God in our hearts every day? Contrast this to Nietzsche, however, who says God remains dead, and we Catholics know something much deeper, and that he is alive in the Eucharist. As we reflect on Jesus' condemnation, however, we may ask ourselves, who condemns us to our own cross? To answer this question, we'll first approach the infamous depth psychologist Carl Jung. Jung suggests that everyone has primordial images which exist within a collective unconscious, which is inherited. And only then it's uniquely expressed through archetypes, which are informed by individual experiences. We'll discuss many of these archetypes, but the important thing to know is that these archetypes give insight into the values of the individual. Simply put, everyone serves a master or a lord. It's whatever they place at the highest of that hierarchy. Moreover, Jung believed that the image of Christ represented the archetype of the self, the fully integrated human person. Psychologically, the call to imitate Christ mimics that of individuation, which Jung described as the process of bringing the unconscious to the conscious. In Catholic thought, however, it's sanctification or deification in Eastern churches. To become an integrated whole, we must face another archetype, though. This is known as the shadow, or the parts that we reject. Simply, when steeped in sin, we must confront the demons or become one. This is what we see with Pontius Pilate in the crowd. The collective shadow puts to death innocence itself. So when I ask who condemns us to the cross, it's often ourselves. And it should be, because we have to confront the shadow to become fully integrated. But why not address the shadow initially? According to Alfred Adler, founder of individual psychology, humans are motivated by striving for superiority or power, often to compensate for vulnerability. In other words, it's tough work. But if you thought salvation was going to be easy, you're sorely mistaken. In the second station, Jesus carries the cross. One important note, though we condemn ourselves to our own cross, God calls us to it, just as he did his only begotten Son. In fact, this higher purpose is seen in how Jesus accepts the cross. In the health sciences, there's a model. It's called the trans-theoretical model of health behavior change. It includes 6 stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, he knows it, and maintenance and termination. This begs the question, where do we stand in contemplating our cross? For all intents and purposes, are we not even thinking about it? Perhaps we've terminated, either for a good reason because we've conquered a sin, or because we've given up, the bad reason. Some of us may be preparing, which is a good idea given I told you it's going to be tough work, and maybe some of us are in the action phase. My advice is cooperate, don't contemplate. In the third station, Jesus falls the first time. When we contemplate the suffering of Jesus Christ and how he's brutally tortured, crowned with thorns and clothed in a purple robe, we realize this was all meant to humiliate and mockingly deny his kingship. When he fell, the soldiers struck him repeatedly. Psychologically, we too face brutal blows when we fall under the weight of our crosses. Shame, guilt, anxiety. Often as a defense, we put on a front or something Jung called the persona. Social life sometimes requires a persona so that we can belong, work, and live peacefully among others. However, when we refuse to address the shadow that I mentioned earlier, our fate is like that of the horse of Raskolnikov's dream in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. We are beaten into submission unto and into death as our innocence in the form of a child looks upon in fear. And worse, we're also the brutal murderers. The Roman soldiers who mocked Christ attempted to strip him of his dignity, yet the very symbols of humiliation became signs of truth. Christ thus takes the blows of the shared shadow of humanity, which is why Jung calls him the perfectly integrated whole. We call him the spotless victim. You may see where I'm going. Naivety to your own cruelty is how to stay crushed under the weight of the cross. So be prepared to take ghastly blows, wear a lowly crown, and maliciously be beaten down by your shadow. For Christ's role is not taken away by humiliation, but revealed through it. Our role, priest, prophet, and king by the virtue of baptism, is too. Here I have one note, an existential logotherapy, which I have an affinity for. Guilt and anxiety, they can serve a purpose if existential. In this case, you're not the assailant, but you're rather the priestly figure appointed toward God. Even Christ sweated blood in the hours up to his crucifixion, indicating that the breadth of emotions are justified so long as they're ordered towards Christ. In the fourth station, Jesus meets his mother. We contemplate Mary, the mother of God, the Theotokos, that who is more spacious than the heavens, meeting her son, Jesus Christ, as he carries the cross. In psychotherapy, especially the humanistic approaches like person-centered therapy, healing is often built through what's called the therapeutic alliance between client and therapist. It serves as a model relationship so that the client, who focused on that relationship, can then go outside of the four walls and two chairs to build meaningful relations. It's characterized by trust, empathy, and something called unconditional positive regard. The therapeutic alliance, in other words, does not prevent the client from staring into the abyss, but rather accompanies them into the darkness, a form of crucifixion for the therapist that willingly takes on the profession. Mary represents Jung's great mother archetype. However, Jung suggests that this can exist within the individual psyche as well, and it carries both a positive and negative valence. The negative valence, or the terrible mother, is devouring, controlling, suffocating, destructive, and possessive. Whereas the great mother, the one we see with Mary, is nurturing, protective, fertile, wise, and caring. This alliance we see with Mary, though maternal and therapeutic, also places Mary as the new Eve, which is why Jesus calls her woman, to contrast Eve's terrible mother archetype. In fact, for these reasons is why Mary is often portrayed youthful in sacred art, in spite of being biologically much older at the time of Jesus' death. If you reflect on Michelangelo's Pieta, Mary is quite large in comparison to her adult son who was crucified, placing them back into the moment of mother and child at the crib. As she holds her dead son, she recognizes that she could have been the terrible mother, devouring, possessive, controlling him from ever going to the cross. Yet instead, she chooses to be the great mother, nurtures him so that he may save the world. This is the female crucifixion. The lesson of this station: when you take on your cross, find someone that will perfectly share in your sorrow. And don't let the terrible mother, who's likely yourself, devour you. In the fifth station, Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry the cross. During Lent, we celebrate Palm Sunday. And interestingly, our Messiah rides in on a young, untrained, rather stupid donkey. I would have expected a Ferrari or something. I don't know. But this is what we see in this station. Simon of Cyrene, merely finite and sinful like us all, helps Jesus carry his cross. However, it's also Simon's cross, as it is ours. In fact, all our sins are embodied by that cross. In this moment, Simon had answered the logotherapeutic demand to take responsibility and face the existential reality. In fact, Frankl joked, the founder of the theory, that there should be a statue of responsibility to contrast that of the Statue of Liberty. The lesson for this station is twofold. First, find a Simon of Cyrene to help you carry your cross. Second, be a Simon of Cyrene. It's your existential responsibility to take up your cross. It's your responsibility to cooperate with grace. This is how you become the hero within your own story. The sixth station, Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. This station symbolizes compassion in the midst of suffering. According to tradition, the holy face was imprinted on the cloth. In fact, this is what Veronica means. It's comprised of two words, the Latin vera meaning true, and the Greek ikon meaning image. Therefore, Veronica means the true image. This demonstrates that dignity is revealed through suffering, and love leaves a mark on the soul. In fact, this is seen physiologically. When one's in love, there's an increase in oxytocin, dopamine. Sometimes their pupils dilate, their heart rate elevates. A broken heart is often seen the same in brain scan images as that of someone who has physical pain. In spiritual practice, this station asks us to reflect on imprinting the Veronica, or the true image of Jesus, on our hearts. This is a worthy aim. Psychologically, however, this station asks you to gaze upon your own Veronica, your own true image, and face what you're called to be. This is the existential question posed by Frankl in his humanized psychiatry approach. For God created you in his image and likeness for a call. This is your Veronica. In solution-focused brief therapy, there's a question called the miracle question. It states, if you were to go to bed and wake up tomorrow and everything would be fixed, what would be the first sign? This might be a good way of understanding what you're called to be, what your Veronica is. When facing your cross, wipe off your face, take responsibility, and continue moving. The seventh station, Jesus falls for the second time. When fathers play with their child, it often looks different than that of a mother. It's typically rougher. And this serves a purpose. It serves, one, to be a safe boundary expansion training, supporting emotional regulation, social competence, and even exploratory confidence. Station 7, God the Father permits rough and tumble play of sorts as Jesus falls the second time. Thus, as we carry our cross, we will expand our boundaries, our confidence, and our emotional regulation. So when you fall, do not feel weakened, but rejoice in knowing you're getting stronger as a child playing with his father. The eighth station, Jesus meets the woman of Jerusalem. Karl Marx is perhaps one of the most profoundly stupid philosophers to ever exist. He called religion, amongst many other things, the opium of the masses. In contrast to Jung, who was by no means a leader of Catholic thought, he leaned more agnostic himself. He stated, rightfully, no tree, it is said, can grow to the heavens unless its roots reach down to hell. This is what we see in the eighth station, with the intense weeping from the women of Jerusalem. This is the immense sorrow of Catholic Christian life. Certainly not an opium for the masses. Rather, it's a form of exposure therapy, so that we may face the demands of existential thought, like existential guilt. What can I be and how come I'm not it? Or death anxiety, which closely relates to memento mori in the Catholic faith. Remember your death, and then live rightfully because it's going to happen soon. This brings sorrow, and with sorrow, tears. This is often referred to as impasse in Gestalt therapy, where an individual can no longer rely on defense mechanisms. In Catholic life, this is called repentance. The lesson can best be put like this, and this is somewhat derived by St. Ambrose. The salvific waters of baptism are found in the tears of repentance. As you carry your cross, pray you may sorrowfully weep. In the ninth station, Jesus falls for the third time. The striking reality of this station is its proximity to the last fall. When we fall, especially repeatedly, what images or messages do we tell ourselves? You can include this. What messages do you all tell yourselves when you fall repeatedly? I figured at the ninth station we might be falling asleep. That's good. That's a positive one. Complete opposite. What did you say? Tell yourself to quit being an idiot. Yeah. I think oftentimes those messages that we tell ourselves when we fall, especially repeatedly and close back to back, they are those negative ones. I know I fall victim to that. But I want to suggest something we call a cognitive reframe. And this is especially true in rational emotive behavioral therapy, developed by Albert Ellis. It targets irrational, self-defeating beliefs, such as demanding perfection, catastrophizing, or low frustration tolerance. It uses a model called the ABC model. A, the activating event, B, the belief, and C, the emotional consequence. B can be either IB, an irrational belief, or RB, a rational belief. With our irrational beliefs, often telling ourselves to quit being an idiot or you just fell or whatever that may be, instead, when we fall in close proximity to our last, can we not as easily believe that we'll stand up again, for we've done it twice before? The lesson, as you face your shadow, the darkness, the abyss, as you face the crushing weight of the cross, you can choose to feel pity for yourself, speak negatively about your lack of distance gained, or you can choose to recall all the times that you've gotten back up. The 10th station, Jesus is stripped of his garments. In Gestalt therapy, developed by Fritz Perls, you operate on a few principles: self-awareness, the here and now, paradoxical change, responsibility, closure, and the unity of mind and body. I'd say the largest of these is self-awareness. In nakedness, Christ is once again typologically revealed as the new Adam. In Adam, the desire for greatness led to the paradoxical change in the form of a fall. Jesus Christ, however, aware of a deeper call, humbly embraces the vulnerability. In remaining exposed and obedient, removing everything from him essentially, he paradoxically gains everything, not for himself alone, but for all those who believe. Thus, Christ's ordered nakedness reverses the disordered grasping of Adam. What Adam seized, Christ surrendered. What Adam hid, Christ revealed. In therapeutic language, this resembles something called the void state, the place where one releases compulsive striving. As Catholics, we recognize that every earthly desire ultimately falls away, leaving only one true need: communion with Christ. When I played baseball here and eventually hung up my cleats, I recognized that baseball didn't build me into the person I was, but it rather stripped away all the parts of me I didn't need to be. The lesson here is twofold. Become self-aware, not through eating forbidden fruit, but through nakedness. For vulnerability out of naivety is not virtuous, but vulnerability to step in high grass where there most certainly are snakes, that's courageous. Be courageous. Second, transcend all needs other than that for Christ. In the 11th station, Jesus is nailed to the cross. In individual psychology, developed by Alfred Adler, the primary human drive within a psychologically healthy individual, that is not tyranny or domination, but striving towards growth and meaningful power. This is sometimes described as a healthy will to power, understood as the desire to overcome limitations and live with purpose rather than control others. In fact, Adler believed that psychological health is marked by something called social interest. And this is the capacity to cooperate and work towards a common good. In Christian theology, the wooden cross parallels that to the wooden crib, reminding us that Christ's suffering and kingship are united. The cross is also portrayed in Christian tradition as a throne for Christ, who reigns as high priest, with arms extended in what's called the orans posture. However, this posture also represents something else: an open-armed embrace. As we carry our own crosses, we shall remember those behind our why. In fact, Frankl, when reflecting on his time in a concentration camp, insisted that one can choose to live virtuously even in the darkest of times, as he reflected on certain capos, which were the prison guards, who in spite of the environment chose virtue. As Catholics, we're privileged to understand the concept of redemptive suffering, meaning that our struggles, when united with Christ's love, can gain spiritual purpose. Frankl suggested this purpose gives meaning to your suffering. Alfred Adler called it social interest. Christ called it love. The lesson here, when you mount the gibbet of your cross, insist the nails be stapled in such a way that you die with your arms extended. The 12th station, Jesus dies on the cross. The beauty of this station is both profoundly increased and suppressed by our hindsight. We know the ending. But I want to take a step back for a moment. According to the Gospel of John, Jesus' final words were, "It is finished." As his skin tears, so does the veil in the temple, symbolizing the mark of the new covenant. This is a crucial moment for the Christian narrative. But those around him, what they saw was their Messiah crucified. This demands the onlooker to face the existential reality of death. It demands you to do what's often central to exposure therapy. Create for yourself conditions of discomfort that rival any circumstance that can be imposed on you by others, by yourself, or by nature, and you will have created a tonic for resilience. In the 13th station, Jesus is taken down from the cross. The clearest reason for this goes back to the prophecy in the book of Isaiah. It says, "They made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man in his death." What I like to say here is that suffering is sanctifying. We have to treat it with reverence, and we do so with rest. There's a concept in psychology called ego depletion. Ego meaning self. Self-control is like a muscle. When you exercise it, it can become stronger, but temporarily after just exercising it, you kind of lose the capacity to do that. Anyone in here that's lifted before knows that if they just did a max rep on something, they're not going to go do the max rep again. They're a little weakened temporarily. We too have to recognize that in our faith sometimes, recognizing that our suffering is sanctifying. Sometimes, to treat it with reverence, we need to rest. The 14th station, the last station, Jesus is laid in the tomb. This can be viewed as the moment where suffering is completed, control is surrendered, and hope rests quietly in mystery. Similar to therapeutic acceptance states in Gestalt psychology, but it's grounded in the theological hope of the resurrection. Yet, as I said earlier, we have the luxury of knowing the story. And I cannot confidently say I would have believed. Perhaps I would have been Thomas, who stuck his fingers on the side of the wounds to see if it was truly him. So when all fails, when your Messiah appears to be absent, what is there to do? Be nihilistic? I wouldn't say so. I would suggest hope is probably the only answer. Yet hope in social psychology is the thief of joy. What we hope for may never come into fruition and disappoint us by comparison. Some social psychologists thus resort to hopelessness. In the final station, I'm going to break free from the confines of the infra-faith motif of psychology, something below faith, and appeal to something much greater, faith itself, miracles. While we may be bound by much, God is not, and he works in our suffering. Suffer often, suffer well, and never lose hope of the resurrection. Thank you.